how much harder is it for a calisthenics athlete, let's just say some guy or some girl, doing a bunch of pull-ups, a bunch of push-ups, you know how it is in the gym, you're a certified athletic therapist and a trainer as well, right? Kinesiologist, I could list it out, but it would sound like Game of Thrones, but all your credentials. So tell me, if I took a calisthenics athlete and walked him into a trapeze studio, how would he do? Would his training suffice?
Oh, probably. The difference I would say there is that there's the artistic aspect of, like, aerial in general, so trapeze or not trapeze. Those skills translate very well into it. The main difference I would say between a calisthenic athlete is that the bars they use are they're rigid, so what they're attached to doesn't move, and therefore the way your momentum can be used is a bit different than on a static trapeze or on a dance trapeze, that the ropes will move with you. So generating that swing is just a little bit different than on a like static bar. The difference I would say is in like the artistic aspect of it. Like sure, they'll be hella strong, which is awesome. They'll have, you know, some of these basic movement patterns like an invert, so lifting your legs up and past your head to bring like basically your bum up to your hands. That's a really basic movement that we need to be able to get up and under the bar and up to the ropes. And if somebody doesn't have that, then makes things difficult. So they'll be able to do that, but are they able to put it together into a routine? Are they able to transition their movements into each other? I would say that's probably the biggest gap between the two.
Hi guys, welcome to the Mind, Body, and Spirit podcast. I'm your host, Itai Aran, and on this podcast, we discuss ways to develop ourselves in mind, body, and spirit with different guests specializing in different fields from all walks of life. Enjoy. Hi guys, welcome to the Mind, Body, Spirit podcast. I'm Itai Aran, your host, and today I'm joined by a certified athletic therapist and former professional circus performer and coach, Yasmin Mucher. Thank you for coming on the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
No worries, no worries. So, how's your day going so far?
It's good. We moved into my first home today, so big day.
Congratulations. Congratulations. Okay, so I guess the first thing I want to ask you is tell us what got you into circus, because you started really young, right?
Kind of young. I started at 13, and I feel like relative to the like dance, gymnastics, like artistic sports space, that's actually kind of late.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but I honestly I always loved watching it, and then one day I was like, Ma, like, I want to do this, and we found a space, and then the rest is history.
Did you find there was like a big difference between those athletes that started like 4 or 5 years old and yourself, like starting at 13? Like, was there a big gap, or were you able to pick it up naturally?
I think the biggest thing for me the two biggest things were flexibility. It took me a really long time to like develop my splits and my middle splits and my back bending. Honestly, my back bending was never great because at 13 I was basically stopped growing. Like I haven't grown very much since then. So I wasn't able to adapt to those more like extreme positions the same way if I had started when I was younger and was like growing up moving that way. And then the other aspect of it would be more so the fear. And so when you're little, and especially like when I trained
bend in that sort of way.
Yeah, or when you're trying to like tumble or flip your body, and I primarily was an aerialist, so falling and dropping on silks on trapeze. When you're younger, that fear aspect isn't always there as much. It's not as developed.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I thought a lot. You know?
Oh my god, for sure. Okay, so tell me, why did you choose circus over gymnastics, right? Because gymnastics and dance tend to be the sports that young girls are put in as opposed to like soccer, basketball, etc. And you gravitated to circus, which from my understanding is way more difficult, right? Or is it just...
I would say that depends. And there's a lot of like... the word I'm thinking of is interdisciplinary. I don't know if that's the right word. Overlap. Overlap is my word.
Okay.
There's a lot of overlap.
Same techniques, same ideas.
Exactly, yeah. And yeah, a lot of kids are put into like dance gymnastics when they're younger. My parents don't do the sports. They don't do any sports. It is not their thing. So they didn't really put us into sports when we were kids.
So you had to ask for it, like you said, right?
And it was something that I had seen and I had loved, and it took me being like, I want to do this, I want to try this. I feel like dance and gymnastics, I had seen my friends do it, and I'm like, I can't do that. Like, I'm not, I don't bend that way, I don't move that way, I don't have the history of it. But circus was sort of outside of that. As much as now I could look and say, yes, ton of overlap. At the time, it was this other thing that I could do.
I got you. So take us to that moment. Tell us when you decided you want to try Circus. So like, what really sent you there?
I actually saw it on like CP24.
Really?
They went to one of the schools in Toronto.
Yeah.
And I was like, Mom, can I do it? And then the first class, I remember this so well. Going to this class, and they were like, yeah, come to try. Mm-hmm. And at 13, I was the oldest kid there, and there was a bunch of like 6 to like 9-year-olds, and they're all doing their headstands, and they're all doing this stuff, and I couldn't do any of it. Like, it was so bad, but I loved it.
Yeah, I can imagine. Oh my god.
Yeah.
Like, I always thought gymnastics were really cool, right? Especially when you're watching it in the Olympics, right?
Yeah.
So, Circus, whenever I saw Cirque du Soleil, whenever they would come in, the family would take us, right?
Yeah.
And I actually trained a couple circus performers for Olympic lifting to become more explosive.
Yeah.
Yeah, right? So...
That's awesome. Yeah.
You're awesome. Okay, okay, so clearly you fell in love with the sport, you started at 13. Take us through it. When did you start performing?
I started performing probably like 15, 16. Okay. Actually, like, I did my first little like recital at 14, and this is where I think the shift was. Like, I always really enjoyed it, but my coaches had, the set routine that they give their students, and me and these 2 other girls that were my age, we did our little routine on our trapezes, and it was great, and then we came off, and then the, 6-year-olds went and did the same routine, and then, they bowed and they came off, and then I came back. That was, the Christmas show. I came back in January, and it was a new coach that had just come back from university. Yeah. And we were talking about it, and I was like, I know that I can do better, and I want to do better. And she was like, okay.
So when you say you want to do better, take us through maybe a little bit of moves that you do in Circus and how you transition to something more difficult. Elaborate for the viewers, how the levels of moves go.
Yeah, so not necessarily better, but it's I wanted to develop my skills more. It's I know that I knew that I had potential to do more. So whether that's a difficulty of personally, trapeze is my love. Yeah. Trapeze is my thing. I don't enjoy doing silks as much. I don't enjoy doing aerial hoop as much. I knew that I wanted to get good at trapeze, and there was just all these other movements that I could see other people doing, and I wanted to do them.
So break down for the viewers a little bit that are not familiar with Circus. So take us through aerial hoop, trapeze, silks. Yeah. Break it down for them. What is
a trapeze, there's a couple different kinds. There's static trapeze, which is a bar that's in the air, and the ropes are parallel. Usually with that one, and depending on where you train, it's high enough that your feet don't touch the ground, but depending, some places are fancy and they can lift it up and down as you go. Then there's dance trapeze, where it's still a bar, and then the ropes are from one point, so they're in a triangle shape. And with that one, usually it's low enough that you can touch the floor while you're holding on to it. And so then you can run around with the bar, you can swing with the bar, that kind of thing. Then there's things like swinging trapeze or flying trapeze, where it's the same parallel ropes, but you'll utilize a really big pendulum kind of swing to use that momentum to do movements really big releases and twists and flips and that kind of thing. Static trapeze and dance trapeze are my jam. So on a static trapeze, lots of releases to catch at my ankles. Lots of utilizing the ropes to wrap myself up in them, and then sometimes fall out of it in a good way, fall out and catch, or create poses in the air, and then also a lot of single arm holds under the bar.
So let's talk about the physical requirements of these. Or let's talk about trapeze, since that's your jam, right?
Yeah.
So how much harder is it for a calisthenics athlete, let's just say some guy or some girl, doing a bunch of pull-ups, a bunch of push-ups? You know how it is in the gym. You're a certified athletic therapist and a trainer as well, right? Kinesiologist. I could list it out, but it would sound like Game of Thrones, but all your credentials. So tell me, if I took a calisthenics athlete and walked him into a trapeze studio, how would he do? Would his training suffice?
Oh, probably. The difference I would say there is that there's the artistic aspect of aerial in general, so trapeze or not trapeze. Those skills translate very well into it. The main difference I would say between a calisthenic athlete is that the bars they use are they're rigid, so what they're attached to doesn't move.
Yeah.
And therefore, the way your momentum can be used is a bit different than on a static trapeze or on a dance trapeze, that the ropes will move with you. So generating that swing is just a little bit different than on a like static bar. The difference I would say is in like the artistic aspect of it. Like sure, they'll be hella strong, which is awesome. They'll have, you know, some of these basic movement patterns like an invert, so lifting your legs up and past your head to bring like basically your bum up to your hands. That's a really basic movement that we need to be able to get up and under the bar and up to the ropes. And if somebody doesn't have that, then makes things difficult. So they'll be able to do that, but are they able to put it together into a routine? Are they able to transition their movements into each other? I would say that's probably the biggest gap between the two.
And so take me through a day of training for a trapeze athlete, beginner, intermediate, expert.
I would say it probably looks very similar. It's just the level of the skill that somebody's training. So you'd want to start with your warm-up, which the usual warm-up, there's nothing, you know, it's not rocket science there. Get the heart rate up. Get into like practicing your basic movement patterns that you're going to need for that session. So heart rate up, do some jogging, some butt kicks, some high knees, do some skipping. You might want to add in some like high kicks or side kicks, that kind of thing. One of the main differences I would say with circus as well as like artistic sports is that there's a much bigger requirement for like bigger ranges of motion. So let's say a single...
And how would you get that increased range of motion? Was it like proprioceptive stretching? Did you have your coaches kind of helping you get into that end range and then kind of getting comfortable in that end range?
I'm gonna ramble,
Go
and
ahead.
you gotta stop me. Okay, so
I'll do my best.
Yeah. So when I was growing up, and this also like led me into to be a kinesiologist, to be an athletic therapist, we would do our warm up, and then we would do a whole bunch of static stretching, and then we would go and train. Okay. Then at the end we would do our conditioning after we were all like super tired.
That seems counterintuitive.
Yes, it is. And this is also, it's getting a lot better, but back in like when I started in 2008, between like 2008 to 2012 or so, and it's still improving, but like there weren't, our coaches weren't necessarily certified coaches. You know, I love them. They did so much for me and I learned so much from them, but it's not that they had education in coaching and kinesiology and physiology and that kind of thing. They were previous like circus performers. You know, they were gymnasts and they taught us what they were taught.
Yeah.
So whether that came from a scientific basis or from an anecdotal basis, well
you don't want to be the one to say it.
Yeah. So in my ideal world, for somebody, beginner, intermediate, or advanced, doesn't matter. You'll start with that warm-up, where yes, you're getting your heart rate up. Then you're going into your basic movement patterns, warming up those range of motion that you need. And this is where there is a bit of a debate, and there's no hard answer for this. But a lot of people will say static stretching isn't great.
Before, right? You should be doing it after, as far as I was taught.
Yeah, so, yes, but say I need to pull my splits during the skills I'm training.
You need to be.
It's going to be beneficial,
to be in that range of motion.
Exactly, to warm up that range of motion.
Yeah.
And we can counter the effects of static stretching on like that decrease in power that we see afterwards.
Yes.
You can counter it by getting up and doing some like power movements after. Just making sure that those muscles are ready to go afterwards. And so if you need them, if the skills that you're going to be training that day require that kind of range of motion, yes, that's in there. There's also going to be some active flexibility in there. So we're not, the only way that we're like warming up our splits is not by sitting in our splits, but it's by doing leg lifts. It's by doing like hip flexor, like more contractive exercises, and like eccentric lengthening of the hamstring. So maybe adding in some deadlifts, that kind of thing. Whether body weight, single leg, who cares?
I love it.
Yeah,
so I want to carry that momentum you have and channel it into my last kind of big question, which probably going to take up a nice chunk of time, right? Is that what training methodologies would you use to train a circus athlete? Because some people, when they see gymnasts in the Olympics and stuff like that, and I'm translating gymnasts and circus athletes, like you said, they're similar in their capabilities, right? But they look sort of superhuman, right? When they're going into those triple backflips and like
superhuman.
they are very impressive, right?
Yeah.
So for our viewers and for just the general public, right? What training methodologies would you use to create such a specimen, such an athlete?
Oh goodness. So you have to have the skill specific work. So that's like what we talked about before. Have that skill specific work. I would include the conditioning either like within or next to the skill specific work, because a lot of the times you're not just training one person, but you'll have like a class. So while somebody's in the air doing a skill, while like whatever your gymnast is on a vault, but again the training would be like really different. We're comparing them here, but it's not that comparable, I would say, because let's say a gymnast training vault is insanely explosive versus an
any
aerialist.
Olympic lifting in there? Any
Yeah, you could, but it depends on the goal. It really depends on the goal. So just say like a specific one, it depends on what you're doing.
What they're trying to do, right?
Yeah.
Sport specific movements. But that's the thing with circus, it's so acrobatic in nature, right? So like if a basketball player comes to me and he's like, oh, I want to jump higher, I want to be a better basketball player. Okay, sport specific movements, ladder drills, and then jumping, right? Mimicking what he would be doing, and then squatting and deadlifting and benching, primary movements to get force into those primary things he's going to be doing. But with circus athletes, they're so, like I said, acrobatic, right? So can you train that?
You totally can, and there's a lot of benefit from doing. Let's put aside Olympic lifting for a second, because the technique of that is like, woo, it's a lot.
Yeah.
But let's start with just basic lifts. All right, squat, deadlift, bench, like military press,
dumbbell work, all that stuff. Yeah.
Exactly. If we get those basic movement patterns under control and we can build strength in those basic movement patterns, then the strength of your jump is going to be so much better. Because as much as like, yes, we can talk about Olympic lifting, where we are right now in like the circus world, especially like, yes, we can think Cirque du Soleil, but there's a huge amount of like recreational circus athletes.
Yes.
But if we can get them squatting well and deadlifting well and incorporating maybe one day a week, honestly maybe one day every 2 weeks of just like regular weightlifting,
it'd be huge.
that could be super, super beneficial. Because we don't necessarily, we talked about those movement patterns of circus, which is like a pull-up, an invert, getting your split.
Do they shy away from the weight room, circus athletes?
I don't think so as much now. There's a lot of us advocating for like getting into the weight room, but it's also, okay, so somebody has, now aerial coaching certifications are a thing.
Fantastic.
Cool.
I'm surprised they weren't a thing before.
Yeah. Next episode, okay? We don't have time to get into it here. But it's like, okay, we have an aerial coaching certification. That doesn't mean they know how to squat. That doesn't mean that they know how to apply a squat into, like, how do we train this? So there's a lot to it there. So if we go back to, like, what did that training day look like? Get your warm-up. Get your, do your skill-specific work. Can we incorporate, some basic movement pattern work in there? So our squats, our deadlifts, getting proper overhead range of motion, all right? And that can fit in either like into your stretching or into your lifts. That may not be necessarily a heavy weight, but we're practicing that technique of getting all the way overhead. Maybe we're doing assisted chin-ups instead of like unassisted chin-ups, but in that assisted chin-up, I'm focusing on that scapulohumeral rhythm and properly pulling my shoulders in and properly letting them come back out on my down. If we can fit in, and like I say if we can, we're gonna be able to fit in another day in the week where we can get some like resistance training, some weightlifting in there. Heck yeah. Depending on somebody's discipline and also their style of performance. If somebody's more bendy and likes to incorporate that more into their work, they'll spend more time either in their practice or like I have another day of the week focusing on that flexibility training. And the flexibility training isn't just static stretching, but it's active flexibility, training those poses, training the strength for those poses. And that all like fits in together.
Amazing. That's amazing. So warm-up, sport-specific work, warm-up, flexibility, end range of motions, static stretching, active release, all that kind of stuff. Then sport-specific work, then a little bit of strength, and then wrapping it up. That's essentially the training methodology.
That's what I found can work. But again, it can be super variable because it's usually a single person sport.
So we have to go based on the athlete.
Go based on the athlete. If they don't necessarily need a ton of range of motion in what they're doing.
Exactly.
Then,
just like with personal training and every other sport, you have to see the athlete,
yeah.
see their strengths and weaknesses,
yeah.
see what they want to accomplish in the sport,
mm-hmm.
and cater to it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Love it. All right, so I want to wrap up the episode with you telling me your favorite performance moment or circus moment from any competition.
Oh my
or
God.
Performance or recital or whatever you want to call it.
My favorite moment.
We want to know.
Oh my goodness. I think one of my favorite moments was when I was in Halifax. So I started training in Toronto and then I moved to Halifax and I got really involved in the circus community there. 2 reasons. 1, because I had no friends. 2, because I went to this class and wanted to like impress them because I was like, yeah, I do circus. And ended up being like on their performance team and then all of a sudden like couldn't back down from doing these like, you know, really like challenging and powerful movements. So I was like, well, I'm gonna be the best, let's go. And with that I really got to tap into the artistic side of it, and I got myself a sexy little costume, and it's my first time basically performing in like hot pants and a sparkly bra, and I got to go in the air and just do this very powerful routine for the first time, to Moon Age Daydream by David Bowie. And it starts with like a growl that I make a full-on claw and like roar face with my hand. And it was like my favorite thing and really allowed me to embrace the artistic aspect of circus and not just the the athletic side of it.
It's amazing. You know what? I believe you told me something around that story before. That's why I have you say it as El Tigre in my phone. Honestly, Yasmin, you're amazing. Thank you for coming on the show. Thank you for enlightening us about circus and piquing all our interest into those training aspects that come with it. And for all our viewers that are interested in taking up circus, we're going to have Yaz's Insta and info at Bend Don't Break. That's her company, her athletic therapy organization. And thanks again.
No, thank you so much. This is great.
Take care.